Welcome to today's edition of Daytime Dialogues. I always have a pleasure of welcoming guests, but this time the guest is really very special, someone I've known for many, many years and didn't know how famous he was until just a couple of years ago. Rabbi Ari Solomon has his roots at KINS. His grandparents for many, many years were members before they made Aliyah. His great-grandparents davened at the shul. I got to know him since he was growing up, and all of a sudden I discover that not only is Ari Solomon a Rebbe at TABC, and not only is he making Aliyah and going to be a Rebbe at the Yeshivat Mevaseret Yerushalayim, but also he's pretty famous, having been featured in the Wall Street Journal and online and all different kinds of resources because of his graphic design, and not just any graphic design, but his designing of sneakers. For Chicagoans, that means gym shoes, sneakers and cleats for people, for pro athletes. So let me just start out real simply. Ari, how many pro athletes wear your sneakers?
Yeah, so over the last couple of years, it's the numbers in the thousands at this point. We've been doing, I guess it started in 2020 during COVID. And since then, my first job, I mean, I don't know if you talk about that, but my first job was with Jacob deGrom of the New York Mets. So that was the first pro athlete I ever worked with.
I read about that. You made a sneaker specifically in commemoration or memory of Tom Seaver, the pitcher.
Yeah, it was that was a special one for him because that was also just after Tom Seaver passed away. And that was really one of my first opportunities. You know, obviously this skipped a lot in the story how I ended up there, but you know, just off the bat, right? And Jacob deGrom was one of the few people who can really, you know, kind of, I'd say, be compared to Tom Seaver in Mets history as one of the greats. And he wanted to honor Tom Seaver on his cleats, so we put together some really cool design. My first one ever, and that got a lot of attention in social media and the world. Then from there, I was just, the word was out there, and since then we've worked with thousands of across all sports.
So the people who don't really understand, let me just start at the beginning. When you talk about designing sneakers, it means that they start out with their shoes.
Yeah. So basically, what I do is, I'm the head designer for a company called Stadium Custom Kicks. And so Stadium Custom Kicks starts a very unique brand. So what we do is we work directly, like I would say just off the bat, like I'm not a competitor, for example, with Nike or with Adidas or with a shoe brand. I actually work hand in hand with them. So what that means is that we'll take, you know, regular stock shoes. Like let's say Nike creates a white, you know, base model shoe that you can go find in your local sports store. The one that's, you know, available online. And the thing is, for Nike to actually manufacture a shoe in a special colorway, it has to go through rounds and rounds of approval just to create one thing. It has to create, you know, you have to order them in bulk and probably in the thousands and the millions, you know, from China. So for them, it's just very easy for these big brands to just order, like, you know, a white model, a blue model, and a black model, then call it a day. So obviously that's not, you know, so exciting. So what we do is then we'll take those shoes and without machines or anything, actually with artists and by hand, and then we'll do anything to the shoes. So, you know, add colors, add designs, add graphics, add all these types of things to make them, you know, much more cool than just the regular plain standard shoe that was being sold. So that's kind of what we do. That's our niche model. So that's why that's basically what we do.
So if you have thousands of athletes wearing your shoes, why are you teaching part-time? Or are you teaching full-time and doing this part-time?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that's really that was my, you know, my number one, I'd say, Parnassa. But yeah, I really grew, you know, over the last couple of years. Baruch Hashem, I've been put in a situation where, you know, I do see and recognize that, you know, I internalize the words of Perkei Avos, which is "Aseh Malach To'arai," as I said, Taras Lekeva, Aseh Malach To'arai, which is, you know, really the ultimate goal in life is to use all of our means that we have to, you know, grow in Torah, ultimately to spread Torah. And, you know, and I've been blessed with a lot of, you know, special tools that I've realized that can be used, you know, to expand Torah, you know, and obviously in the chinuch world, talking about, oh, why would I want to be a Rebbe and teach Torah? Because there's an inherent, you know, excitement and respect that I saw that I can get the kids into a base medrash and actually want them to have to listen to me. Said, hey, well, I have their attention anyways. We don't just have to talk about sports. Let's talk about, you know, what's really amazing in life. And I have tremendous passion for learning, tremendous passion for Torah, and trying to grow every day in that sense. So I would say that's everything it's hand in hand. But the teaching is just come, you know, naturally, just Baruch Hashem, after a lot of growth, and it's just come naturally, something that I just love.
But how did you get into all this? I get getting into Torah. You come from a family, whether it's the Lazars, your great grandparents who I knew, the Solomons, who we know so well, your parents. I get the Torah part. How do you get into designing sneakers?
Yeah, so that's definitely that's the big question that everybody always asks me. And so now that we're actually here to discuss it, I can give you the good story. Normally I normally give the big hits, but I can give you the real story here. So the way that I really got into this world was in high school. So I was in TBC. I was a big athlete. I played 5 sports in high school, and I knew that my life was like I wanted everything to do with sports. But I also knew that the sports world is so hard to break into. It's like almost impossible unless you have connections, because everybody wants to work in sports. It's the type of thing with when you're growing up and you're going to sports games, there's nothing else you want to do. It just seems like a lot of fun. So I knew it was gonna be really difficult. And I also knew that, I don't just want to be the next person. If I throw my name on a resume and just throw it into a stack of papers, I'm gonna get lost right away because I don't know anybody. I have no connections in the world. I also know it's very difficult to be from in the sports world. There's a lot of Shabbos. As I was thinking, there would be a lot of Shabbos issues. So I thought the only way that I could really kind of separate myself is I have to do something visually that really makes me stand out and something really unique. So I started learning graphic design in high school. My parents really encouraged me to learn some programs, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator. And so slowly I started to learn these programs. I started to do like bar mitzvah logos, ads, flyers, just kind of getting the gist of these graphic design programs. And I started a little business. I was doing, ads, flyers, just some stuff on a local level. With the ultimate goal of somehow, turning it into sports. Didn't know necessarily how at the time, but I knew that I was gonna figure something out because I knew there's a lot of need for graphic design in the sports world. So I took that to yeshiva. I was in Mivaseret, where I'll be returning to soon, with Hashem. But I took my computer with me to Israel, and basically I would just after night seder, like at 11, 12 a.m., that's when I would open up the laptop and start working. It was still more on like a local scale, the bar mitzvah logos. And then one day, the big turning point where this all kind of just started was I came back to my room after night seder, and like everything on my computer was just completely wiped out. Like there was not a single thing left on my computer. I lost every single one of my projects that I've ever done, all my other work I've ever done. So I thought that was going to be, I was obviously really disappointed in the beginning, but there was a lot of siyat d'shmaya there, where that forced me to say, okay, enough with the bar mitzvah logos. Let's start figuring out how to get into the sports world. And that was when I really took a new path in trying to design. I started designing pictures of athletes and graphics of athletes. And I started a social media account. I started an Instagram account where I would just create pictures of like random athletes, and I would send it to them and ask them, hey, if you post this on your page, and just basically tag me, then I'll do some free artwork for you. And I started messaging like thousands of athletes saying, I'll do these really cool graphics for you. And just all I need is a tag. Sure enough, I got a couple of responses from some agents and from players and saying, yeah, no problem. We'll shoot you a tag. And that was ultimately how I started getting like foot in on like a very basic level. Then I started off in Yeshiva University at the very beginning. I didn't finish there. I finished in the FDU Yeshiva program. Fairleigh Dickinson, but I started at the very beginning of COVID. I was in YU, and that was right before COVID hit. I had a chavrusa. His name is Eli Jonah Carls from Montreal, and his best friend growing up, he went to public school. His best friend was actually a first round pick of the Detroit Red Wings. So then, which ended up being that was very interesting ashkach over there. So a lot of pieces fall into place for this story. And then once COVID hit, we were all back home and doing nothing, and I took advantage of the opportunity. We got in touch with this guy who was in the Red Wings. His name is Joe Valeno. Now he's still in the Red Wings, big guy. And we started this social media challenge, to help raise awareness for mental health. And we used his connections to basically, get a lot of NHL players involved, and that was really how I started to get my name out there. Then I started after that. Once I had my foot in a little bit more, I started a similar kind of podcast. Guess what we're doing now? I started something called the 5-minute drop, which the whole goal of it was I would reach out to professional athletes, people in the sports world, and I would say, hey, if you come onto my live, interview for 5-10 minutes, very chill conversation, you come on 5 minutes, we talk, we have a little conversation, and at the end, I'll reveal to you live on a canvas a piece of custom one-of-one artwork. I'll get your reaction live on camera, and then I'll send it to you as a gift. So it was a no-brainer for these guys. They were doing nothing during COVID, and I got a ton of responses. That was how I started to network. And then bring it all around. Now this is the and this long story, but the final piece was the fourth guy that I had on my 5-minute drop, and I did this intentionally, and I was hoping that exactly where we are now would happen. Is a guy named Alex Katz. He's actually a pro baseball player. He pitched for Team Israel in the Olympics. He was just in the World Baseball Classic for Israel. He's an amazing guy. And he started a company called Stadium Custom Kicks in 2019. And I knew that this company that I spoke about at the beginning was something really interesting, something really new and unique. And I said, this could be a great opportunity to network and see maybe I can get in on it. And sure enough, that's what happened. He came on, we clicked off very well. The company was growing. He has a lot of connections, obviously, for being in baseball, and that's how the company was able to take off from the beginning. And that was how I ended up in the space. Then that brought to the Jacob deGrom that I already mentioned at the beginning, and he said my first assignment is Jacob deGrom, and then from there, that is the story.
I understand that the Jacob deGrom piece happened he pitched on Shabbos. You didn't know till after Shabbos if he actually wore the sneakers.
Yeah, that was really wild because that story was, I mean, I had no idea because Jacob deGrom if anybody knows Jacob deGrom, he's a very superstitious guy. Like, he is not loud. He doesn't wear fancy shoes. He doesn't talk to the media. He doesn't have social media. He's like a very just there to play baseball, and that's it. So I would never really expecting him to really wear those shoes. Because that collaboration was with the charity that they were basically gonna pay for a pair of shoes for him to wear in the game. And then after the game was over, Jacob deGrom was gonna sign the shoes, and then they were gonna go up for auction. So like he was doing a charity, but we just thought, and what his agent said was that he was just going to wear them during like a bullpen session before the game and then take them off before the game even started and then pitch in his regular cleats. So I really had no expectations for those shoes whatsoever. And that was the craziest thing. When Motzei Shabbos, I looked at my phone was just like blown up with messages from Alex and all these other places saying, oh my God, look at this. And sure enough, he wore them in the game. That he just loved them so much. He put them on in the game. This is the most superstitious guy in the world, and he struck out 10 guys. So I'm not going to say that had to do with the cleats, but it's not good to be superstitious.
So when I have a feeling that you have students, you've had students this past year, you will have students who look at what you do and say, hey, how do I do something like that? What would be your advice to one of your talmidim?
Yeah, the advice that I really give is it's a really unbelievable thing. A lot of times people say, like, it's very very cliche is, oh, dreams can come true. It's very cliche to say that, but the truth is like, they're not going to come true if you don't do anything for it. So the most opportune time, and it is true. People like to talk about and say, oh, are you at a disadvantage because you're from Jew and this, and say, I'm not going to call it a disadvantage, but there are certain obstacles which, in order to achieve those dreams, which maybe someone who's not Jewish would not have to overcome certain obstacles. We do have to overcome those obstacles. That just means we have to start a little bit earlier, and actually plan ahead on how we're going to overcome those obstacles. So the advice that I give to my talmidim is, you guys are in high school right now. Start figuring out kind of what you want to do right now. Start figuring out this dream and path, and just start building right now in high school. Like, start building right now in high school or whenever you are. You can even doesn't matter if you're 25 at the time. I tell them, just start doing it, start piecing together, and just start talking to people. Start figuring out how are you going to separate yourself, because it's not going to be a quick 1, 2, 3 journey. It's really possible. Just work at it, see what happens. And you're never going to get there if you don't try. And it's just the earlier you start, the more people you talk to. I say the bigger network you can get as early as possible is definitely the best advice that I give to them.
Now, you had mentioned earlier that you're living the dream of what Chazal talked about at Aseh Toratcha Keva, of making your Torah the main piece of your life, and the rest of and everything else you do is secondary. What's your day like? How much time do you spend on graphics, and how much time do you spend? Obviously, it's summertime, you're getting ready to make Aliyah, but how much time are you spending teaching?
Yeah, so my day starts. So I started a morning call. So my day starts at basically 4:45. That's pretty much when I leave. That's when I go to the base managers. We start at so Seder starts at 5:30. So in the base managers, and so I basically dedicate that time. So basically between 5 to around 11:45 a.m/12, whether that's a mix of teaching, morning Seder. That's just, there's a lot of stuff going on in that slot. I can give you more specifics, but that's general. That's the general breakdown. Torah is that time, and then once the afternoon then comes after that, that's when I'll work for a couple of hours. Baruch Hashem, I'm in a very good situation where, since I do graphic design, and I could really do a lot of work on my own time, so I'm able to, and I work remotely. I can work anywhere in the world, and I can hop on calls whenever I want to hop on calls. So I'm able to throughout the afternoon kind of mix it up a little bit. That's when I could dedicate an hour here, an hour there. I don't have to do a 9 to 5. I'm able to work, a couple of hours in the afternoon. I'll be mixing in other Siddharim during that time. Then around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that's when I have another Seder, about like that's 4 to about 4:15, about around 5:30, give or take around. And then finish working for the day, do some exercise, spend time with the family, about 6 to 8 p.m. Then at nighttime I give a Kinyan Masechta Chabura in the yeshiva. So it's around 8:55 through about 10 o'clock. That's night Seder. And then after that we go to sleep and start again.
All over again. And then, not to get into too many details, but if I wanted, not that I would wear cleats, but let's pretend you were talking to somebody who wanted a pair of cleats and called up the company or called up you directly. What are we talking about in terms of magnitude of cost for your services?
Yeah, since it's all custom work, it really just depends on kind of what whoever's calling wants done. Certain designs I'd say the general range, give or take, of somebody who's coming to get a custom pair of work done is going to be at minimum between like $150 to $1,000. I'd say the median is people are spending between $300 and $500 per pair, because it really is just custom. Like I said before, it's all done by hand. So it depends on how much time is going to go into the design, how much effort is going to go into it, whether it's like more meticulous or less meticulous. So it's really a custom structure. So we have a very workable model for people where they can just kind of say, hey, I'm looking to spend, I have a maximum budget of, let's say, $350, and I want to do something to represent, my company. Here's my company logo. Can you send me a design of what that would look like? So sure, I'll go on my computer, create a design that fits that price range. And then they see it and they could say, actually, you know what? This is so cool. I want to add a couple of other things to it. And I'll increase my budget to 400. Can you show me what that would look like? So then you could adjust it. Then they say, okay, great. Let's pull the plug and let's go for it. So it's a very custom structure, kind of what anybody wants to do. That's why we're very easy to work with, all across the board. That's why we're able to get kind of so many clients, because it's the type of thing where people might be skeptical in the beginning. They say, what is this custom shoe? I don't know what this is. I never saw this. They say, who are these people? They're not Nike. But then they say, hey, yeah. And they see the prices, they get scared away. But then we say, no problem. You can just tell us what you want to do and we'll work with you. Not even negotiating tactics. We're more than happy to do it.
What's your favorite story that came out of all of this? Obviously, the first time when DeGrom was pitching and he was wearing your shoes, I'm sure it was pretty high up there. But what's your favorite story? What was the most surprising thing that happened when you were working with athletes?
There's a lot of surprising things, honestly. There's so many stories. I mean, I'd say like the main overall, I can give a specific story, but I think the real eye-opening thing for me that I think most people don't really get to experience, in terms of athletes, is that people really view athletes as kind of a novelty. They themselves as people, that they're just there. They're just there for the money. They're just there to entertain us. So therefore, they're people, but kind of, they're people, but like we don't have to treat them the same respect that we treat with our friends. Where we view them as they probably don't even think like us. They're all probably just in a whole nother world of arrogance, and a whole nother world of just totally different life than us. Can't even relate to us. We can't relate to them. And that's how I found like a lot of people view athletes. And what I learned is that it's really completely opposite. It's actually really incredible. Is that most athletes, especially in baseball, are very, 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 very nice guys. I have very few experiences where I've dealt with somebody who's, overly arrogant to the point where it's like they won't even talk to me, they won't look at me. Very few people like that. Most people are actually very nice, very sweet, very down to earth. And contrary to what people think, is that, oh, they don't remember anybody besides their wife. Like, no, they're just regular people. Like, people, like they go onto the field, and yeah, sure, no, they're playing in front of thousands of people, but it's not like those thousands of people make like an impact in their life. Like, they remember the people that, like, a lot of times people are going to say to me, like, oh, that guy remembers you. How does he remember you? I say, he's just like us. He goes to work during the day. He doesn't interact with thousands of people around him. He interacts with a few people during the day. People that he sees, he knows, he recognizes, he does work with, he remembers, he knows them. They're just normal people. It's like funny. It's like, that's the point I try to get across when people ask questions like that. It's just, these guys are just so normal, going to work, doing normal things, really nice people. And I mean, there's tons of stories. I mean, one story that just like stands out, which is very interesting, is that one time when I go to these fields, I very openly, I pretty much dress like this. When I go to fields, I have my tzitzis out. I'm more than proud to do that. And then there was it happens occasionally, but there was one specific time where I was standing in front of like the Milwaukee Brewers dugout, like I was on the field and I had my tits out, and all of a sudden, like this one guy in the league, he comes up to me, and I don't usually share who this is because he was a little bit more personal. He said, but it was like a guy who you would never expect. He just like comes over to me. He's like, by the way, he's like, I had a bar mitzvah, and I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, my mom's Jewish, and I'm like, what? This is like one of those guys you would never expect. Like, yeah, and he started talking to me and just bringing stuff up and asking. And that was really enlightening. It was really like a really nice moment that these guys, again, they're not just in a whole nother world. They're in our world. They're in the same world. They're interested in, it was really nice to be able to kind of inspire somebody like that to actually reawaken his Jewish pride for a second.
Do they ever get surprised that the person on the other side of the sneakers is a frum person, is your age, black yarmulke tzitzus hanging out?
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, I mean, it's funny because we live in a time where nobody's gonna dare, even call attention to it unless I mean, I personally love it. I love when people call attention and we talk about it, but it's very rare that I get like like an open reaction to that. But I think it does surprise a lot of people because people it's an interesting rap, in the New York area. It's obvious, you go to City Field and the whole place is half the stadium is a mincha minion. So, but when you meet guys who come from places like other stadiums and other places, and they grew up through the system playing in Wyoming. They went to Wyoming State College and they got drafted by like the Oakland A's, and then they come in and they're like, yeah, what's going on here? It's a little interesting because they just view, an Orthodox Jew as, they just assume I'm Hasidish or something, and that I do this or do that. So they are pleasantly surprised, but at least it's some.
Any fun perks besides standing in front of the Milwaukee Brewers dugout?
I've had a lot. I get a lot of really cool perks. Yeah, thank God. It's a lot. It's a lot of cool perks. Because I'm officially credentialed with Major League Baseball, as like a on-field media member. So that means that I could really, wherever I want to go. If I want to go to a game or a stadium, I have a special login. I can just apply, pick up a credential, just walk through the tunnel, walk onto the field, talk to whoever I want to talk to. Go out. So I mean, that is definitely a cool perk of doing this job.
It sounds like it. And in terms of next steps, have you thought about, because earlier you said you tell the students you got to plan and you got to work at it. What's ahead for you in addition to making Aliyah and becoming a Rebbe at Mivaseret?
Yeah, I mean, my steps, I think I is basically just getting better and strengthening my path that I'm right now. Strengthening and learning, strengthening as a mentor, strengthening as a mechanic, all that. I mean, I still feel I have eons and ways to grow, in terms of that. And I think that's the bracha of being, a Jew, right? And there's always a goal. It's not, you don't have to think too hard about what your next goal is going to be. There's always something there for you to work towards. There's always more and more to strive for, and more to work for. And then in terms of course, the business, just definitely growing in the way that we're doing. Slowly but surely.
Are there other areas that are personalized, like sneakers and cleats and everything else? Are they able to personalize anything else in the sports world?
Yeah, we actually do. We do more than just in cleats and shoes. We do like bats, batting gloves, helmets. We could do skates. We can customize anything. It's funny. We can customize like cars if anybody wants that. Like golf carts. Like we've done crazy stuff before.
And the major leagues don't have a problem if a batter shows up with a customized bat.
So the bats right now are only allowed during pregame. The league already, it used to be a little bit, the league used to be very, very anti this type of stuff before COVID. There was very strict cleat rules before COVID. Like this business, if not for COVID, this business would probably not exist in the way that it does now, because up until COVID, players could only wear black, white, or team color cleats, like plain, all restrictions. There was one weekend called Players Weekend, which doesn't exist anymore, but there was a weekend called Players Weekend where players were allowed to wear any cleats they wanted. It was, and all the colors and designs, and it was extremely popular. So during COVID, when Major League Baseball, it wasn't even just COVID itself, there was also a lockout during the COVID year, and they experienced like so many people just turned away from the game and said, this is ridiculous. We don't want anything to do with baseball anymore. So they needed to do something kind of fun to get themselves more relevant again. So they lifted all the cleat restrictions because they said, let's try to get custom footwear back into the game and back onto the field. So they as a league they're very difficult sometimes to work with. In terms of cleats, they're very chill now. Bats is the next step. You can't use them in game. That's unfortunate. During the All-Star game, you could use custom bats. So hopefully we're working on that. But yeah,
You just missed it last night. Did you have any bets there?
I had a bunch of cleats in the game last night. I didn't do any bats for the All-Star game, but I did. There was a bunch of cleats in the game that I did last night.
Do you remember offhand who wore them last night?
So Alexis Diaz on the Reds wore a pair of cleats. David Bednar from the Pirates wore some cleats. Josiah Gray from the Nationals. Kodai Senga on the Mets, he wore. I actually didn't watch the game, but I'm trying to remember. I don't even know if they got in the game, but these are the guys I at least did for.
You actually sign somewhere your artwork on the cleats, or is it just from the company?
Yeah, on the cleats. So on the digital versions of the cleats, they'll have my name and my logo, and everything. But on the actual shoes, we don't put any branding on it. We let them. We just want,
let them wear it.
Keep it clean. Let them wear it. We don't want them to worry about branding and this. Let them wear it.
And of all of the athletes who wear your product, who's the most famous?
I think I mean I think probably Max Scherzer is probably up there on the Mets. Damian Lillard, he's a big basketball player. In the Portland Trail Blazers. I think those are some of the really big guys. Mike Evans on the Buccaneers was one. There's a couple of guys who I think are more on that kind of.
And my guess is that if you'd look back 10 years ago and you'd have said that you would have a relationship of some nature with any of those players, you would have thought that whoever was saying that was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people the line that I say, yeah, and this wasn't my dream come true, because this was something that was so far out of my wildest dreams. I couldn't have even this wasn't even a dream of mine, because I could never imagine even starting to dream about it. That's how far removed it was from my mind.
It's amazing. And are there other frum people in this field?
So not so much, which is something that and I've started to see a lot of people, there's a lot of interest, a lot of people are constantly reaching out to me, trying to see, hey, now we see that this is potentially possible. Because I think it's been it's been difficult for people to kind of see a path in the sports world as from, and when I say from, I mean in the sense of it's even already being Shomer Shabbos is very difficult for certain and doing a lot of certain jobs, but even in the sense of the situations you have to be in, is that a place for Bento, or the places you have to go? There's a lot of thought that goes into it. Can you live a life while you're basically dealing with, I would say, such a materialistic what's the word I got tongue tied over there, profession, excuse me, such a materialistic profession, in the sense where you're just dealing with all these athletes, or their whole life is gosh me is what to say. It is difficult, but I think that there's, like you could carve your own path in anything and make it possible. So I'm hoping to see more from people coming into the industry, and I'm starting to see a lot of people who are very, very, very interested in trying to make their own path now. I see a couple of guys on social media with from kids who are starting their own graphic design things, the same thing that I was doing, and they reach out to me and say, yeah, we saw that podcast, we saw what you did on this, we read this article, I'm trying the same path, we'll see you soon in a couple of years. I'm like, great.
In terms of your learning, our time is really coming to a close. I just want to tell you something from Chicago, even though you keep on quoting the Mets, and I'm a Cubs fan, and we won't bring that up too much. But the reality is, Rabbi Star Zatzal, who was a Rosh Hashiva in Skokie, used to say, the more you know you don't know. And so I saw that reflected in your comments about your learning and your opportunities to teach, but it also sounds like you're doing amazing things. And I'm looking forward to hearing great things about you at Mevaseret, because we have Chicago boys who are there and learn there every year, and it's a wonderful yeshiva. So Ari, our time is up. I want to thank you for giving me this half hour. I want to do a specific shout out to your grandparents, to Dov and Pam Solomon, because if I don't do the specific shout out, I might get in trouble. And also thanks to your parents, Moshe and Sonia, who really did a wonderful job with you. You should continue, you should do great things and have tremendous success in your aliyah. So thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate it. It's so nice it's very full circle. I see the familiar background behind you. Haven't been there in a while. So I'll have to pay a visit.
Well, hopefully soon we'll have you a reason to come back again. Thank you, Ari. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Good to see you.